and welcome. I recently listened to a Ram Dass episode of the podcast Be Here Now, for those who may not be familiar. And in one of the episodes, there was mention about being in the flow of life. And in order to be in the flow of life, there's nobody home. And what does that mean? It means there's no doer of these actions, there's no egoic energy that wants something, that desires something. Perhaps egoic desire is a better way to put it. Only in the space of awareness, where action is happening, can you understand the flow, experience, and discover the ease, how things unfold. Perhaps you can recall a time when there was somebody home. Perhaps somebody upset or frustrated as action was happening. Just a tension in the mind and body. How much that can influence the very moment action is happening. The energy that is transferred, that is part of that action. You can only imagine perhaps in this moment you can feel it, you can experience the deep unbalanced of action when the mind is involved, when identity is present. There are so many layers, I sense there are so many layers, such density to when, as Eckhart would say, the little me gets involved in the doing. And there is a thought of, this has to turn out this way, or I'm fearful of this not happening. Let's use an example that comes to mind. For example, baking a cake. The energy used, the fear or the what's the next thing I need to do. You may be baking the cake, but your mind is on I've got to get, after this, I've got to get here, I've got to do this. We may be complaining about it. Why do I have to bake this for somebody? Why couldn't this person have done it? It's their responsibility. And you may spill the ingredients. You may miscalculate what's needed. You may forget a vital part of the ingredients. Almost like a dye. If you imagine clear liquid, let's imagine a glass of water and you add in some red dye to it. Let's just use red as the egoic colour for the time being. And it changes to everything about the action. Everything sort of almost as an egoic layer as everything is done. Even perhaps the energy transferred into, let's use the cake again, as making the cake, the energy transferred into it. That's something perhaps beyond my very basic understanding, but that energy can be transferred into food, the way food is made. If it's made in a, let's say, in a state of love, in a state of ease, or is it made in a state of anxiety if you're in a rush to do something else, or if in that time you're angry and it covers the entire process of that. And you feel the burden of it as well. You may do an action and you feel completely exhausted. And perhaps the action was physically challenging, but the amount of mental noise, the talk of identity, just imagine how much that adds to the actions taken. And perhaps you can recall a time when it's almost over-exceeded. You've done many actions when usually you'd get exhausted, and after you've done it, you've looked back and think, oh, I managed to do all of that. And of course the I is just perhaps more translucent than the me that did these actions. But perhaps there's a sense of when those actions were done, it was done in a state of flow, in a state of one thing at a time, in a state of presence. And that line really spoke to me there, nobody home. For so many of us, there is that identity we carry, and for some it is extremely heavy, and for others maybe not so much. And is that something that you can be aware of? Even when somebody is talking, perhaps one of the most challenging of actions sometimes is the things taking place in a relationship, with another person, and that person is talking. Is there somebody home listening that is already preparing their argument or their viewpoint to oppose what's being said or to disagree? Or perhaps just to talk about their own, for the identity to talk about itself? Or is there nobody home and there's deep listening taking place? There are lines that I've come across, I'm not sure where, it's almost as if you have to get out of your own way. in order for life to flow and unfold as it does. And this can mean different things for depending on your life situation. For some, there may be a perpetual condition to worry about an outcome of something. And that worry goes into the action or into whatever's happening, and it blocks the flow. It covers the stillness where you experience the fullness of life. It's almost as if you want the room to be very bright with the sunlight coming in, but a curtain keeps closing. It brings over the shade. Perhaps in this instance it's our identity, the me, the person who's supposedly home, in control, wanting things done a certain way. And at first it may be an extreme reaction. The mind may say, well, of course I've got to be here to take care of things, to make sure things are done properly, make sure things are done right. Instead of trusting that life has been taking care of life all of this time, but the mind has just been commenting on it. Maybe complaining, maybe resisting, maybe making things more challenging in the illusion of that control. And this is another way of going down to the essence of, are you thinking? Is there a thinker in this moment? Or are you simply present and aware? And this is something that has its own journey. There'll be certain situations or events that take place, and afterwards you'll be like, oh, there was somebody behind the wheel trying to control everything, or worrying about everything, complaining about everything, perhaps having an opinion about everything, judgment. And it requires perhaps trust, to trust in life. And it can seem absurd that the limited mind may have the thought that I know better than everyone and everything, better than life itself. And it grips the steering wheel tighter. Of course, the steering wheel and the car that goes nowhere. So perhaps this is one thing that you can allow to absorb into your practice. The pointer of nobody's home. I wonder if you can sense the lightness in that. Nobody that is resisting. Nobody that is complaining, commentating on everything. And the room is bright and the sun is coming in. The windows are clear. The cake is effortlessly made with, let's say, without a thought. And often it's one of those times when it's done in that energy, no thought about it, and then let's say somebody tastes the cake, a guest comes over, you take it to them and they taste it and they, oh, this is the best cake I've ever had. And there's no big celebration, there's nobody home. But it's made in that flow. You didn't try to make the best tasting cake in the world for this person, but in the flow, everything is taken care of. And perhaps it's something to digest this pointer in your own way. What does that mean to you? Nobody's home. In order life to flow, there's nobody home. I originally heard this episode perhaps maybe a week or two ago, and quite often when the inspiration comes to expand or to speak about a pointer or something I've heard, it's usually best done in that moment or soon after, where it's fresh. And but I, even though some weeks have passed, there's something in me that wanted to mention this pointer here, even though there may not be the best unfolding of it in this audio, in this episode, but the pointer alone is enough. And you can find Ram Dass's podcast on any, I believe in most if not all podcast platforms, and it's called Be Here Now. You can type in Be Here Now Ram Dass and it should come up. It's on YouTube as well. And this is again, you can almost, when the sense of nobody's home, maybe a smile, a light, very subtle smile may emerge, a smile of relief, of and of course it may be very subtle for you. It may not be perhaps having the expectation of a big shift, but it may just be very subtle. There's a slight, little bit more sunlight coming in. Things are flowing more smoothly. And there may be less residue left over from something, whether it's an interaction or an activity. You may find there's less analysing that or thinking over, oh, I should have done this when that happened, or I should have done this. It's just, you've let it go. It's already flowed past, just like the water in a stream. And there's nobody home to hold on to things that should have happened or that wasn't enough. You're just simply here. Thank you for joining me for this episode. I wish you well, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Take care.